Hey there, recruit, and welcome to a compilation video of all my early Call of Duty campaign videos. And for more epic Call of Duty content, go ahead and check out my second channel. Enjoy! Everyone knows I've always been a liker of Call of Duty. I played most of the big ones back when this franchise was at its peak, and a couple of the recent ones, but I've always been interested in a deeper dive, so I'm gonna start taking a look at these games. Probably all of them. Unless you want me to stop, then I'll look at them even harder. Give me a like if you want me to stop. First-person shooters. Games where you shoot the first person. When you hear that phrase, what game pops into your head right away? If you're a cool guy, it might be one of these games, but when talking about the modern FPS, the Call of Duty franchise has to be the genre's Lucas Galactopus. Of course, modern COD may not be your personal top choice when it comes to a quality FPS, but it's hard to argue that this is not the most well-known franchise on the scene these days, for better or for worse. But it didn't always was this way. Technically, first-person shooter games go all the way back to the 70s, with vector graphic classics like Walk Through Hallway and unauthorized Star Trek sim. Although I've checked these games out, and I have to say the words first-person, shooter, video, and game are all used extremely loosely. They still had a ways to go. So then you had like Pac-Man Maze Shooter in the 80s, then Hover Tank, which was similar to Pac-Maze, but was more cool and better graphics. Of course, things really took off with Wolfenstein 3D in 1992, which was followed by Doom, then Quake, then GoldenEye, then Halo. We already know about all that. I'm trying to keep the history lesson brief here, right? GoldenEye was, of course, really popular on the Nintendo 64, but otherwise all these games were pretty much only PC games, and most of them would get some kind of console port eventually, but shooters on consoles were mostly a joke until Halo came out on the Xbox and redefined everyone's expectations for what a console shooter could be. Despite this leap forward, the first Call of Duty would release 2 years later for PC only. My dedicated viewers here on the Call of Duty channel know that I always prefer my gaming to be done on a gaming console for a multitude of reasons. Every single game in the main COD series after the first one was released on console day and date, and while there was an remastered version of the original once on the Xbox 360 and PS3 as a digital download, it hasn't been available for a long while, and no physical version was ever released. So the people that really need me to be gaming on a PC can take the dub on this one. I booted up Call of Duty in its 4:3 aspect ratio, couldn't go into full screen because it made the image super dark, and jumped into battle. And so you see, I did like this game, but I did not like this game for the shooting. The shooting was not fun, I do say. I have a hard time with mouse and keyboard controls already, and it didn't help that the muzzle flash really blocks your vision to the point where I feel like I'm just firing blind most of the time, which was also not helped by the high accuracy that enemies seem to have, and ooh, they get the drop on you pretty easily. I was always getting ambushed. I did not feel very cool. And even on normal difficulty, I had to go through a lot of levels many times. I could only get through them by memorizing where each and every enemy would spawn. A surprising amount of gameplay is focused on sabotaging artillery, but maybe that's very historically accurate, I have no idea. You carry 3 guns, 2 main guns and a sidearm. I can't wait to see when this is changed to the traditional 2 guns only system, please no spoilers on that. There are no shotguns to be found, that's mildly interesting. You still collect health packs like in shooters of yore. I always associate the regenerating health system so closely with this franchise, so that was a mild surprise. Don't spoil when that changes, thank you. This was also one of the earliest games to popularize aiming down sights as a mechanic. Definitely not the first, but that is another mechanic I associate closely with this franchise, and it makes sense that it would be here from the beginning, although it doesn't feel very good on a mouse. The checkpoint system was not great, too few of course, but also they seemed to be somewhat random. I would end up in some tough spots just respawning into gunfire over and over, and other times where I'd run past a spot I'd been past a few times, and then it would give me a checkpoint, and I don't know why it didn't give it to me before. Not good for me, too hard for a little baby such as myself. What I did like about this game was the presentation. These games always seem to have great production value, even the bad ones. The graphics hold up pretty well, but the atmosphere is what's still the most impressive. The calm anticipation on the training base tutorial area, the ominous quiet of the village in the first mission, then the stress and chaos when the shooting inevitably starts. The score was done by Michael Giacchino, who, if you don't know, would go on to compose some of the best musical scores of the 21st century and the Batman score, so maybe show a little bit more respect. The American campaign is very patriotic patriotic and definitely the easiest of the three. Remember when games used to get more difficult the further you went? You play as some kind of Midwest farm boy thrust into battle who slowly gains more confidence throughout the story. I'm assuming that's what happens. The story wasn't exactly groundbreaking and the characters weren't very easy to follow, although I did start to recognize some of your squad mates' names after a few levels, so maybe they're not so forgettable. The story itself is mostly presented through these boring-ass mission briefings, which I mostly zoned out during. Luckily, the game is based on true events. I didn't worry about that, though. I felt like I had enough context to understand that there's and you shoot them and then you win World War II. That was enough for me. The American campaign ends with you saving some British officers from this chateau. I really enjoyed the Indiana Jones secret fireplace passageway. That was cute. When you do get to the British officers, you find out that one of them is Captain Price, like from Call of Duty? He's in Call of Duty? Raise your hand if you knew that Captain Price goes all the way back to the first game. Yeah, see, very few of you. He accompanies you on the majority of missions in the British campaign. Going undercover on the ship was fun. Captain Price sacrifices himself at some point, and you eventually blow up a couple V2 rockets. The Soviet campaign is where things really change gears. In addition to being the hardest part of the game, it's also pretty bleak. You start off in the middle of a terrifying scene, being shipped into the Battle of Stalingrad. Your boat is getting railed with bullets before you're even close to shore. You have your commander standing on the boat yelling at you, in English for some reason, that any cowards or deserters will be shot. A couple of your terrified comrades jump over the side because they can't handle it, and the commander puts his money where his mouth is and shoots these kids in the back. When you miraculously make it to shore, you have to sneak your way up this beach with no guns, simply dodging the hail of bullets. The bleak tone never lets up. Pretty much every level is just desolate, snowy, oppressive, ruined cities. I mean, some of the other set pieces could be downright pleasant. Even when you jump ahead a few years, the vibe doesn't change at all until the very end of the game when you raise the Soviet flag on the Reichstag building and win the war. But we end with a Russian guy reading a letter he wrote to his wife, in English for some reason, about winning the war and going to shake hands with an American soldier, and the brothership he felt with a man who he didn't even speak the same language as, even though again the Russian guy was saying this in English, so still very inspiring. And then the credits are kind of fun. They take you through some of the set pieces in the game from this kind of model display look angle of them. This is also where I found out that Giovanni Ribisi and Jason Statham were in this game as two characters I don't remember. Very cool. I was kind of interested in checking out the online mode, but I wasn't able to get into a match with people, but that's okay because I'm pretty much just here to talk about the campaigns and how high quality of a single player experience these games are. At the end of the day, if you're like me and you like learning about the history of gaming, then this is of course a must-play at some point. It's still pretty fun, but if you're looking for a solid World War II shooter, you have way better options in 2025, even within this franchise. But this game is short, decently fun, not too frustrating on lower difficulties, the presentation is still really impressive, and whether you like it or not, is still a very important game. I like seeing how the aesthetic is so much classier than the loud, in-your-face, extreme stimulation Mountain Dew hit your vape pen vibe of modern COD, and I'm straight psyched to explore the rest of these. Finally trying the ones I've never played, revisiting the old ones I loved, and finding new games to hate on. Call of Duty was an incredibly successful game on the personal computer gaming device, receiving rave reviews, multiple Game of the Year awards, and cleaning up at whatever the video game equivalent of the box office is. Audiences in 03 were blown away by the compelling story, the blockbuster presentation, the Russian accent, and of course the intense gameplay, taking you through some amazing set pieces with a squad of fellow soldiers accompanying you, which was still a new concept in shooters at the time. This new brand of high-budget, realistic, story-driven shooters swept people off their feet upon release. Only one problem: where are the gamers? There was of course a large enough audience on PC for Call of Duty to become a smash hit, but the real market, especially back then, was of course on consoles, and consoles, even the Xbox, really couldn't handle Call of Duty. They just didn't think a satisfactory port was possible at the time. So it was decided that a brand new game would be developed to satisfy console gamers that were thirsty to see what all this COD fuss was about. Well, the first game's developer, Infinity Ward, was busy working on Call of Duty 2, development for Finest Hour went to the now defunct Spark Unlimited. A surprisingly gay logo for a Call of Duty game. Now back in the day, up until a couple weeks ago actually, I remember this as being a console port of the original game, but it's actually a completely separate thing. The fundamental concept is still the same, squad-based World War II first-person shooter where you go through an American campaign, a British campaign, and a Soviet campaign. Well, Wikipedia says this is a side story that is based on the main game. The similarities pretty much end here. I don't really see how this is a side story rather than just its own story. You don't seem to interact with any of the characters from the first game, and you don't even take part in most of the same battles. Maybe it's because Call of Duty 2 directly follows the same characters as the first game, and this one doesn't, so that would make this a side game. But like, the first game ends with the end of the war, so there wouldn't be much to follow them doing. I guess we'll find out in the next video. It doesn't matter right now. What matters is donating money to Wikipedia. In school, we were never allowed to use it as a source, but nothing is stopping me now. It's such a valuable resource and has somehow remained so well moderated over the years. And now with AI giving people 80% accurate information on whatever they Google, reading an entire Wikipedia article is considered doing deep research. Volunteers are the main thing that keep the website alive, and donations keep them from having to run ads or be beholden to any corporate entity, which is something I take for granted all too often. So please, don't let the brave sacrifices of our beloved Call of Duty characters be in vain, and go donate $1 or $2 to Wikipedia right now. We kick things off with a very earnest cutscene about bravery and sacrifice and good job to everyone who won World War II. This game has a slightly more cinematic presentation than the last one, with a few cutscenes that feel a lot more cutscene-y, although the audio mixing seems to be a bit off.
Looks like I found myself in this spot.
What? So after this, you go to create your profile, and then we're hit with an introductory film narrated by the Allstate guy telling us exactly where we are in the war and why. We once again arrive at the Battle of Stalingrad. The Allstate guy implies that all these Russian troops are here due to stalwart patriotism, which is a major point of difference to how it's portrayed in the first game, with them being there because of getting shot otherwise. It seems we're arriving a little late to the battle, since unlike the last game, it's now nighttime, the only light coming from the burning city ahead. When we arrive at the beach, we're tasked with following a superior all the way up with no gun, just dodging gunfire and hiding behind cover, and this is starting to feel extremely familiar. At this point in the game, I was like, okay, so is this just a retread of all the levels from the first game, just kind of rearranged and redone a bit? I mean, this is almost the exact same thing as the first Soviet mission in COD 1. But no, pretty much everything after this part is completely new, including the rest of the Stalingrad segment. I like the stylistic changes made here. I think it looks really cool and dramatic, but we seem to be lacking the scale shown during this part of the first game. We experience the battle through the eyes of Alexander Sokolov. Suck a lot of dicks. A watchmaker's apprentice forced into war, and then Tanya Pavlovna, a girl whose entire family was killed by Germans, whom she's now developed a passion for sniping through the skull, definitely based on the real-life Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Look her up on Wikipedia after your donation. The two of them work together with a few other comrades and push the Germans out of their city. By the way, I'm playing the Xbox version on a Xbox 360 in case you were wondering. After meeting this other guy, Nikolai Badanov, you start playing as him when you launch Operation Little Saturn, which in real life, of course, followed Operation Uranus. I learned that on Wikipedia, thank you very much. They acquire documents and cripple the Germans' air-based abilities, ending the Russian campaign for this game. The war still rages. Our journey then takes us to North Africa, where we burn through a short campaign in the Tunisian desert as British officer Sergeant Edward Carlisle. The African setting isn't explored in World War II media nearly as much as the European setting. I guess before the war, the Italians and the British were both holding territory down there, and according to the Allstate guy, the Mediterranean was now the epicenter of the war at that point, so this was certainly the most unique part of the campaign, but it's also the shortest. I beat it in like an hour. Would have been cool to spend some more time in this interesting setting, I think. Michael Giacchino returns to do the score and totally rips off Star Wars for this part.
Avoid contact and proceed to rendezvous point.
It's even like the exact same desert where they shot Tatooine. I know people say John Williams ripped off Gustavo Dudamel's Solar System album to make Star Wars, but old Gus probably ripped off Wagner's Götterdämmerung for making the Planets album. I never listened to any of this shit anyway. I just know that when I get off my Jeep, the Jawas better stay away from me if they know what's good for them. And then Michael Giacchino, of course, went on to create music for an actual Star Wars movie later on. And we have another Star Wars connection in the form of Sergeant Starkey, played by AC/DC's Brian Brian Johnson, who would of course go on to direct Star Wars Episode 8. Basically in this part, you pop into a village at night, blast the place up, explode a German fuel supply, big old jeep chase through the Junlin Waste, ending up in these ruins where you rescue a couple of these muckers from some plucky Jerry's, and you're all able to make it home in time for Gravedigger's biscuits. Yes, good show, old chap. Quite. We then move to the American campaign, where we start as Sergeant Chuck Walker, overtaking the town of Aachen in Germany.
This is it. We're taking Aachen today.
With the tank squad. This is October 1944, a little under a year before we would win the war, and by this point we were taking the fight to them. I'd say this game has pretty good production value overall, but it's painfully obvious they shot this part at the Universal backlot. After this, we switch perspectives again to Commander Sam Rivers, a black tank driver in a battalion of all black soldiers. He mentions how the rest of the soldiers treat them quite racistly on the base, but that only strengthened their resolve. USA! USA! You tank your way through a couple snowy villages and drive the Germans to retreat. A few months later, the Allies are really closing in. We cut back to Walker, now a lieutenant, his squad escorting Rivers' battalion through the German city of Ramage over to the Ludendorff Bridge, a strategically advantageous crossing that the Germans failed to destroy in time. Walker and his men make it across the bridge and raise the American flag, securing the crossing mere months away from knocking down Adolf's front door and instilling everlasting world peace. During the credits, we're treated to some behind-the-scenes footage of the Allstate guy's voiceover, an interview with Brian Johnson, whose dad apparently fought in the war, and an interview with a real-life veteran, who they don't give a name to, and I couldn't find out who he was. That's pretty disrespectful. Google AI said that this is the Allstate guy, but that's not true. Yeah, so anyway, this game fucking sucks. Sorry, buddy, I know a lot of you out there have cherished memories of this game, and maybe my opinion will soften with time, but I did not like this shit. All the story and presentation were decently done, but I hated almost every single aspect of the gameplay. Let's start with the good. I personally find controllers easier to use than a mouse and keyboard for most games. I know I'm basically alone in that though, but it was good to have a controller. The muzzle flash was a little less invasive, making it slightly easier to see when aiming down sights, and I like that throwing grenades has a dedicated button instead of having to cycle through your weapons to get to the grenade like the last game. I'm pretty sure that's all I liked about the gameplay. Now let's talk about the bad. Grenades, huh? I like that they have a button, but throwing them is stupid. You can't cook them in your hand, so throwing one is an unnecessary matter of precision timing. Can you step out of cover at the exact right second the grenade leaves your hand and also aim it perfectly and dip back behind cover without getting shot? It's harder than it looks. Cover works similarly to the first game. You can crouch and go prone, and the button to stand is still annoyingly a different button from the crouch button. You can still lean out from behind walls using the D-pad, but your supposed allies are one of the biggest hindrances to ever come out of a system that's meant to exist to help you. Like the last one, you're pretty much always accompanied by a squad, but they are so up in your shit the whole time that they often block you off from getting back behind cover and just push you into gunfire. This is beyond frustrating, and at first it seemed like this was the obvious reason why squad-based shooters were so uncommon before the days of reliable AI, but then I realized this problem would be completely solved if they just let you walk straight through your allies. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to. We've already switched to the 2-guns only system, and there's still no shotguns to be found, and now no pistols either. That's fine, I guess. I mean, the shooting's terrible, so pistols probably just would have made me even more sad. The shooting is so goddamn stiff and imprecise. So many times I know I should be hitting a guy, but the game just kept saying no. And once again, the enemies have crazy accuracy. This giant mounted machine gun this guy is shooting me with appears to have far better accuracy than a bolt-action rifle. Who knew? This is on normal difficulty, by the way. I simply would not have finished this game on hard. There's also this really cool feature where if you're getting shot, you can't really move, so if you run out and you get hit with the automatic weapon, you don't get much of a chance to get back behind cover, even if the boys aren't blocking you, which is made extra fun with the screen shaking like crazy and flashing red so you can't see. And this is awesome because dying will send you back over 10 minutes quite often. If you know me, you know I hate having to replay parts of a game over and over for no reason. How Long to Beat lists this game as being about 7 to 8 hours long. It took me closer to 9 hours, but it felt much more like 20 because of how much time you wasted redoing things over and over and over again. People are gonna say I need to get good, but this game is not mechanically impressive or well designed or unique or rewarding enough for that to be worthwhile. The Russian and British campaigns weren't too bad, but the entire American campaign, which is pretty much the whole second half of the game, was just painful. And I didn't find the gameplay fun in the first half whatsoever, just satisfactory. unnecessary. There are way too many janky-ass tank missions. Why would clicking the left stick be the way you fire the machine gun? That's also the stick you move with. This is incredibly awkward and completely unnecessary. Look at all these buttons you had to choose from, Todd. There's still no sprint. We still use health packs. The game goes into slow-mo when you're near an explosion, and I'm not sure if this is meant to be helpful to you or just trying to be a cool effect, but I was never able to utilize it to my advantage. It's also really, really hard to run away from grenades being thrown at you. There's basically nothing you can do to fully avoid damage. One thing I really hated, which is something I didn't even realize I appreciated so much in other games, was the ability to shoot while bringing the sight up to your eye. Like in COD and other games where you aim down sights, if I get surprised, I'll usually start shooting before I've aimed, because it sometimes takes a sec to pull the sight up to your face, and that sec can be the difference between life and death. I also sometimes like to go in and out of aim mode when there's a larger group I'm trying to shoot. Helps with accuracy. But not in Finest Hour, no sir. They make the brilliant move of having your gun stop shooting briefly while you aim. I had no idea how much I used this function until I wasn't able to. Just everything about the way you move and shoot is so slow and clunky compared to the first game. Also, why do I feel so short? In cutscenes, your guy is normal height, sometimes even taller, but during gameplay I'm like 4 feet tall. It is a tad buggy, of course, mostly visual stuff, but sometimes picking up weapons won't work. Like I'll go to pick up a gun and instead I just pick up the ammo and then the gun disappears as if I was already holding it. Other times it'll just say, hey pal, you can't carry any more ammo for this gun. And I'm like, hey, that's fine, but can you let me pick up the gun though? But no, they don't. This is the most frustrating game I've played in a long while. Multiplayer, there's no split screen option, which seems very weird for a game designed specifically to satisfy console players. It has the big head mode, which was mandatory in all games back then, and the Jim Henson Company is thanked in the credits for some reason. They must have worked on the Jawas. And I'd say that's about it for the first COD ever to grace gaming consoles. It's definitely my least favorite of all the ones I've played, and is not nearly as important as the first one from a history of gaming perspective, and it's a lot harder to access too, not being available on any modern hardware whatsoever. It has a manual in the box, which is always fun, but otherwise, no. I would not recommend this game to be played. I had a miserable time with it, and I'm just hoping Call of Duty 2 can turn me around. So if you liked this video, why don't you slowly aim down your sights and shoot that subscribe button for more content. And don't forget that Wikipedia donation. See ya for the next one, bitch. Any video gamer worth their salt has touched tips with a Call of Duty game at least once. Us true gamers tend to look down upon the normies that play these games nowadays. One of the lowest tiers of gamer, only slightly above your aunt that spends hundreds of dollars a month on Candy Crush. This franchise continues to hemorrhage its last scraps of goodwill with each passing entry, becoming more disposable and vapid every single year. That's why it's so hard to believe there was a time when this series was lighting the world on fire. During the 6th and 7th generation, it was fairly common for a Call of Duty entry to pick up a few awards. The first game, Call of Duty, was a huge hit on PC, but the good people over at Activision weren't convinced that a decent port could be produced for the consoles of the time, so on PC it remained. They instead made a separate game for console players, Call of Duty Finest Hour, which was terrible. Go watch my last video to learn more. The original game's developer, Infinity Ward, were hard at work with Call of Duty 2, so development for Finest Hour was outsourced to the short-lived studio Spark Unlimited, thus beginning the trend of having multiple teams work on this franchise. Call of Duty 2 would eventually release 2 years after the original on PC and the brand new Xbox 360 console, but my parents can't afford an Xbox 360. At the time, even with the new generation, the biggest player base was still on 6th gen consoles, and most companies still wanted to capitalize on that much larger market. So instead of a severely scaled down port, they once again decided to develop a completely original game for these consoles. And that game would be Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1, the first game in the franchise made by the once beloved developer Treyarch. Infinity Ward was a brand new studio at the time of the first game's release, a team of ex-Medal of Honor developers setting out to do the World War II video gaming thing their own way, but when Treyarch came on board, they already had a couple decent games under their belt. The most well-known definitely being Spider-Man 2, but they developed a bunch of other Spider-Man games of varying quality, and a few other notable titles, not becoming exclusive to the Call of Duty series until until World at War. Adding the 2 to the title of this game was really more of a marketing tactic at the time, showing people that this game was new, just like the real Call of Duty 2. Made some sense at the time, but now it's just confusing. For example, I used to think this was Call of Duty 2 until very recently, but it is a separate game, just like Finest Hour. I used to think that game was Call of Duty 1. Boy, I'm stupid. See, I'm trying to cover these games in order, but this is gonna be the one minor exception. It was released alongside Call of Duty 2, but technically a week later, meaning if I was really doing these in order, I should cover this after Call of Duty 2, so why didn't I do that? Well, mostly because I had such a miserable time with Finest Hour that I just wanted to get this one over with. I know COD 2 is quite acclaimed, and I thought if I ended up enjoying that game a lot, it would be even more painful to have to go back to a clunky, slapped-together, last-gen, standard definition 4-3 consolation prize that only people with chronic nostalgia blindness could possibly defend. So I thought I'd suffer through one last piece of crap before moving on to the fun stuff. But wouldn't you know it, this game turned out to be awesome. I don't know if it was just because my standards were so low after the last game, or because I got the warm and fuzzies playing this on a CRT TV, but of the 3 Call of Duty games that exist, this is far and away my favorite. And yeah, I'm playing the Xbox version using a Xbox 360 on a CRT TV, so if the footage looks a little ropey, that's because it's pure analog, baby. If you have a problem with that, then you're in the wrong place, friend. The first major point of difference between this and the first 2 games is that you follow one set of characters. I was already starting to get sick of the stories of these games being much more focused on the war as a whole rather than on characters in a circumstance. They had you run through separate Soviet, American, and British campaigns, the story being much larger than any of the characters involved. But this time we're focused solely on the American 1st Infantry Division, or as they're known on the streets, the Big Red One, based on the real-life military division of the same name, handily nicknamed after the Big Red One displayed on their shoulder patch. In real life, they're the oldest service division in the Army, dating all the way back to World War I, and are still in service today, although the lineup has changed over the years. They even have their own theme song that barely rhymes. We play as Sergeant Roland Rogers, the guy on the cover. Other members of your squad include Brooklyn, whose whole thing is that he's actually from Queens.
Hey, you know, my dad runs a deli back in the Bronx, makes the best pastrami sandwiches you'll ever eat.
And we also have the, Kelly, I think. And then there's the guy with the glasses. Okay, so Brooklyn was the only character I remember by name, and I couldn't pick him out of a lineup, and I only remember him because of his thing about not being from Brooklyn, and because there's a character called Brooklyn in an old war movie that I love. When I say I like these characters, I don't mean the way I connect with characters in, say, Red Dead 2 or The Last of Us, or even later COD titles. But the squad itself has a personality, much more than your squad or any individual character in the last 2. The chatter during gunfights is turned way up, they actually behave like a group of people in a situation, and even though I never found myself being able to latch on to any particular character, it was good to feel like one of the boys, rather than some Russian, and then a girl Russian, and then another Russian, and then a English, and then a American, and then another American. It felt like the story of this game was the story of this game, not the story of World War II. The cast shares a few of the less famous actors from the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. It was a big deal at the time. I didn't really recognize most of the Band of Brothers actors. I recognized a few known voice actors, as well as James Patrick Stewart, who I mostly remember from the god-awful Battlestar Galactica spin-off Galactica 1980, where he was simply credited as Patrick Stewart, but he spelled it slightly differently than Patrick Stewart. And speaking of Star Trek, we also have Mark Hamill doing the voiceover for the news segments in between missions, replacing the Allstate guy from Finest Hour. The Allstate guy was doing more of a documentary type of voice, and the lines were written in the past tense, whereas this game treats them more like actual news reports from the time, with Hamill doing a 1940s radio voice type of voice. A very sneaky performance. I feel like I can usually call it when I hear his voice, but I never would have guessed it was him. What, you want me to talk about the actual game? Well, sure. It's Call of Duty. You shoot and get shot at, but the improvements since Finest Hour are numerous. We're somehow still in health pack territory. I always think of this series as popularizing the regenerating health mechanic, but all 3 of these have you pick up health packs. Big Red One is thankfully far more generous with them. On normal difficulty, you'll have more than enough to get you through the weekend. This, combined with bountiful checkpoints, makes for a far far more pleasant experience, because having to redo long sections of a game over and over is not only boring and frustrating, but it also makes the flaws more apparent and makes everything you're seeing and doing way less interesting. The core gameplay of any COD, the shooting mechanics, were the biggest improvement of all. I understand why Finest Hour couldn't make the shooting feel as smooth as it did on PC, but there was no excuse for making it as bad as it was, or for the absolute hell of not being able to shoot your gun while bringing the sights up to your eye. I went more into that in my last video, but I'm glad the studio behind that game lived a short, painful life. All this is to say that I was really worried these terrible mechanics were going to carry over into Big Red 1, but surprise, surprise, Treyarch were actually capable of creating a competent shooter. I tell you, shooting while aiming makes a world of difference. You can cook grenades, which makes them more strategic and less random, and the gunplay all around is just a lot smoother, as if they actually play-tested it to make sure it would feel good. Not the best it would ever get, but more than good enough for the time. There are also a few tank missions, which were a nightmare in the last game, but here they are once again actually fun. The overall mechanics of the tank are less janky, firing the machine gun is done with the X button and not by holding down the left stick, which was an awful idea, and whoever came up with that has never played a video game before in their life, and these tank parts are thankfully in third person, which really makes sense for a vehicle that's so unwieldy. And I like the Mario star painted on the side. I know I should probably be discussing the game more on its own merits rather than just talking about how favorably it compares to a terrible COD, but what I find most interesting about this franchise is seeing how each game iterated on the previous, and talking about them as if they exist in a vacuum is really hard. Visually, it is nice, which surprised me since it was kind of an afterthought of a game made for low-end consoles that lived in the shadow of its big brother, at least at the time. Finest Hour looked fine enough graphically, but it never looked good. This game, it looks pretty good, not only in terms of graphical fidelity, but also in terms of art direction and production design. Environments are more detailed, lighting is more deliberate, atmosphere is much more emphasized. The other ones could look real gray at times. The layouts of the levels feel far more natural and dynamic. We explore the Africa setting a lot more. You fight through the streets of Sicily, parts of France, you fly over the Mediterranean, and we end the game fighting through Germany, not quite wrapping up the war by the end of the story. Oh my god. Oh no, Brooklyn! He's the guy whose name I knew! We're still using health packs as I mentioned. Crouch and stand are still a different button, which I still don't like. We still use the guided compass. There's still no sprint. There's still no shotgun. Still no pistols. I'm unreasonably intrigued to learn when these things change. No spoilers in the comments. Let's see, I do have a couple of notes here, some light critiques. Technically, the game is quite well made. I didn't notice a single bug, but this one part in particular had some serious frame rate issues. The beach landing scene is a million years long. Like, it's cool at first, but why? Having to manually pick up ammo is still stupid. Why would I ever not want the ammo? There's still no split screen, which is lame. Otherwise, you've done a great job. The menu is nice, very classic and bold, while still having some grit to it. We can see what the different controller configurations actually mean. The other two did let you change the configuration, but they never showed you what they actually were. This one shows you. A wise quality of life improvement. Good job on this rainy trench mission. The level design is super fun. The atmosphere stands out significantly. It feels kind of spooky, real cool. But the highlight of the game, the thing it seems most everyone remembers best, is the bomber mission. This is the one mission in the game where you play as a different character who's part of a crew of a B-24 Liberator. I don't know much about military tech, and I usually don't care about it, but I've always thought World War II bombers were some of the coolest planes ever made. And this mission does not squander its potential. It begins calm, you're sitting in the cockpit turret, you can see the other bombers flying information with you, but soon the enemy arrives, and throughout the mission you're instructed to move to different parts of the plane and shoot down enemies from other turrets and bomb some boats and such. What's really cool is how you have to physically move through the plane. You get to see all the little details of everything, and what's most coolest of all is seeing all the destruction of the plane throughout the mission. By the end, you're essentially balancing on a 2x4 over open air. Good graphics on the ocean down there, by the way. But when it's over, you feel like you really made it out by the skin of your teeth. Like the best COD campaigns, it's just a short, concentrated dose of good stuff after good stuff, and you are now educated about this forgotten gem of a Call of Duty game. If you're a fan of World at War and Black Ops, it's really cool to see Treyarch's first stab at this franchise, and it's a good bit of casual World War II media that you can easily blast through in a weekend. Call of Duty was a game back in the day, but before that, the same guys made Medal of Honor, and before that, we had Wing Commander, and before that was World War II. If you try to go any further back, records get extremely fuzzy. Luckily, our journey starts in 2003 with the release of the smash hit game Call of Duty. It was developed by a brand new studio, Infinity Ward, after DreamWorks wouldn't let them do their thing with the Medal of Honor games. Sadly, as popular as Call of Duty was, only PCs could make it happen, so Activision commissioned a side game for console players, Call of Duty Finest Hour. It's awful, but got okay reviews at the time. However, Infinity Ward was not involved with that game, as they were hard at work with the big sequel to their big game, Call of Duty 2. That sequel would eventually release in the fall of '05, 2 years after the first game, making it the longest gap we have ever seen between mainline COD entries. This game, Call of Duty 2, was still too much for those old consoles, but luckily Microsoft were ready with their brand new Xbox just in time for a month after Call of Duty 2 would release on PC. But the Xbox 360 would get it as a launch title a few weeks later. There was also a last-gen companion game released alongside this one for all the poor people stuck on those consoles, Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1. Watch my video about it, it's really good, Treyarch's first Call of Duty. But it was not big money. What Infinity Ward was cooking, that was big money. They were armed with more experience, a higher budget, and the eyes of the world watching. I'm mostly here to talk about the campaign, which was still considered the main course back then. So were they able to improve upon everything they accomplished with the first game? I mean, yeah, this is pretty much a better game in every single way. At first, my memories of the original game were a little blurry since I played 2 other COD campaigns since then. They sort of started to blend together. But once I started playing this game, it quickly started to feel like the real follow-up to Call of Duty 1. Even this early on, it was easy to see the difference between an Infinity Ward COD, a Treyarch COD, and a shitty third studio COD. And to be honest, I'm starting to remember why I used to prefer the Black Ops games over Modern Warfare. Not that Call of Duty 2 was a bad game at all, let's dive in. As is tradition at this point, after the opening logos, we get to watch a very heroic cutscene before transitioning into the main menu. Unlike the last two, we're back on the training base for a nice little tutorial mission, which we did in the first game, but that was a chill, calm American army base. This one's a sad, snowy Russian army base, but the principle is the same, a tutorial. The control scheme in this game is much closer to our modern controls. The button layout is basically exactly the same as what we see today, thank God. Right stick to melee, R1 to throw grenade, L1 to throw secondary grenade, you can mantle walls, and best of all, crouch and stop crouch are the same buttons, so I'm alright now. Sprinting is not in the game, and you can no longer lean out from behind cover, which was a staple of the last 3 games, but I knew that mechanic wasn't long for this world as I have played other COD. The biggest change of all is the implementation of regenerating health, doing away with the health pack system. This really streamlines the healing, for better or for worse. A lot of people think this makes the game too casual, too easy, too low skill. Personally, I'm really in favor of it. Of course, there are plenty of games that would have their gameplay balance completely thrown off if they used this mechanic, but it makes a lot of sense here. In campaign mode, yeah, it makes the gameplay a little less strategic, but encourages the player to be more bold with their approach. Since I view these campaigns more as action movies than as interesting challenges, I think it works perfectly. And for multiplayer, it's a no-brainer. This system makes way more sense for the quick action of a COD multiplayer. Whether or not you like that type of quick action is a different story. I don't really. We're talking about the single-player mode, which once again consists of a Soviet campaign, a British campaign, and an American campaign, a structure I am beginning to tire of. Good thing you start with the Russian campaign, though. So far, those have been the dreariest, and this game is no exception, so it's nice to get that out of the way first. And I like that the American campaign is last. You should really have to earn the privilege of being able to play as the American character. As soon as the game kicks off, this feels like a whole new era for Call of Duty. The new mechanics, the more intuitive controls, the streamlined healing process, the new high-quality widescreen graphics are all obvious improvements, but the more subtle stuff is not to go unnoticed. Like how the muzzle flash blocking your vision was a big problem in the first 2, that's been completely ironed out. The arenas you move through have bigger, more detailed environments, allowing for different approaches in a lot of missions. They really tightened up the gunplay. It's so solid it would barely evolve over the next 10 years. Although it is a shame that you can't lean out anymore, and the aim assist is a little strong. It's borderline auto-aim. I'm not sure how I feel about it. You probably don't like it. Also, the gun is kinda low in the frame. Looks a little weird. Although this might have something to do with having to make the game work in different aspect ratios. I like the emphasis on strategic uses of smoke grenades to get around tanks or machine gun lines or the like. Pairs nicely with how often they have you planting explosives on moving vehicles. There are a couple missions where you drive a tank. I found them to be a bit bland, and I still don't like driving a tank in first person, but they function just fine. We see the return of pistols in the campaign. There's still no... Hey, wait a second. There's still no shotguns. That's 4 Call of Duty games so far and 0 shotguns. Ammo pickup is now automatic, smart. I really appreciate the addition of the grenade indicator, indicating a grenade. NPCs react to getting shot in specific spots, and their death animations are super detailed. Fuck yeah. Placement of enemies feels a bit more intentional, at least on normal difficulty, although there were a lot of them. It was no problem on normal, but would have been crazy on veteran. I don't want to play a COD campaign on veteran. I just want to be engaged enough to where I'm not sleepwalking through it, and then give me a handful of moments where I have to lock in a little bit. But I don't want to die a million times or have to take things too slow. I take things slow when I play Hitman. When I play a COD campaign, I want to take things fast and hard, like Tom Cruise. Cinematic gameplay moments that aren't just shooting are more plentiful, making you feel like an actual guy. This ambush part was like, whoa, surprised the crap out of me. The D-Day landing is a clear standout and not derivative of anything at all. The attention paid to weather and environments allows scenes to feel more dramatic than they did in the first game. Your squad of fellows is more vocal, although they don't have the same level of personality as your squad in Big Red 1. And to be honest, I connected better with the characters in Finest Hour than I did with the guys in this game, and I freaking hate Finest Hour. But in retrospect, I appreciate that that game gave you a little tidbit about each character before you played as them. They were paper thin, but at least I can remember and distinguish them. And I like having some cutscenes. In Call of Duty 2, I couldn't name a single thing about a single person you play as. I don't even know if you played as multiple people in each campaign or just one guy in each campaign. The only character in the whole game I can remember is Captain Price, but that's just because he's Captain Price. It's clear that Infinity Ward were still looking at the characters as little more than a vessel for the player, which would be fine if the storyline itself was a bit more interesting, but really it's just the same thing as the other ones. 3 loosely connected plot lines that are just about fighting Nazis and winning the war, and that's hard to get invested in. Like, I already know the ending of World War II. You gotta make the story about something specific if you want this guy interested. The Modern Warfare trilogy was also not too focused on strong character-based storytelling, but the larger conflict in that trilogy was a lot more interesting because it was completely fictional, so you had no idea where it was going to go. And it told the story of that conflict over the course of 3 games, whereas these early CODs just seemed to be showing you the entire war each time, through slightly different perspectives, but sometimes those perspectives are not that different at all. I just couldn't get invested in the story, and I didn't care about any of the characters, and I already know how the central conflict is going to end because of school and movies, and also because of the 2 previous games that showed me how it ends. But it's just a framework to hang interesting and fun gameplay scenarios on. The story's completely serviceable. The visuals and presentation were quite nice, and technically this is the best looking game in the series so far, but in some ways it felt like a step down from Big Red 1. The menu, while clean and crisp, lacks most of the character from that game, although I found it interesting that when you go to view the controller layout, they use an actual photograph of an Xbox 360 controller, and the visuals, while really impressive for the time, feel a bit weaker stylistically than Big Red 1. This kind of thing is entirely subjective, but I found that game to be far better looking on the whole. And while I think the shooting and gameplay mechanics are definitely superior in Call of Duty 2, I am annoyed that it doesn't let you cook grenades like you could in the other one. You can hold them in your hand indefinitely, but when you throw them, it's always the same delay until they explode. But I can't deny that the core of the game is stronger here than any of the others, and for most people that play Call of Duty, that's going to be the most important thing. For me personally, though, as I age, I find myself valuing story and presentation more and more, so my opinions about these games going forward might get a little weird. I was noticing, like, a lot more blood in this game than before, and then I looked at the box and realized that all these games so far, including this one, are rated T. It's very interesting since I always consider this to be a hardcore grown-up franchise these days. Mysteriously, most of the cast of Big Red 1 are listed in the credits of this game, but I do not recall running into any of these characters at any point. On IMDb, they're listed as playing the same characters again, but on the Call of Duty wiki, all those characters are listed as having only appeared in Big Red 1. And IMDb lists Mark Hamill as the narrator in this game too, except he doesn't actually appear in the game's credits at all. I don't know, I guess the narrator kinda sounds like Mark Hamill. Kinda doesn't though. What's going on? Whoever the narrator is, the voiceover during these news segments is very, very dry, lacking the fun throwback nature of Hamill's voiceover in Big Red 1 or the sexy gravitas of the Allstate guy in Finest Hour. Yet another area where Finest Hour is better than Call of Duty 2. Joking aside, even revisiting a location from Finest Hour at the end of this game left a sour taste in my mouth, though that part was obviously done much betterly by Call of Duty 2. This game is an incredibly solid time, a massive improvement upon the original, even if it's not the best one of all of them. them, although I'm getting a little sick of the World War II setting. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play 20 more of these, you guys. The line at the end of the credits gave me a chuckle. I wasn't expecting comedy from you rascals. The multiplayer, well, the Xbox servers are still up, so I decided to temporarily sign back up for Xbox Live, only to learn that Xbox Live no longer exists. Instead, you have to just sign up for Game Pass, and you get online play as one of the benefits. And after all that, it seemed like nobody was online. I couldn't find a game. Luckily, they finally added split screen, so I was able to invite my boy over and have a little sesh. We played every map in the base game at least once, but we're gonna have to wait until 2006 for the complete experience. It's a fun enough multiplayer, but extremely vanilla. They don't really have classes yet. You just pick a gun you want to use, and everything else is standardized, but each faction has a different set of guns to choose from. There is a shotgun in this, which is insanely overpowered. I'm not sure why they thought it wouldn't be appropriate for the campaign. I'm happy to see him here. I also have it on good authority that most of the other games had shotguns in the multiplayer too. Who cares? This is certainly a very good game, but it's hard to recommend to anyone that isn't just interested in seeing what an old COD is like. It is much easier to get your hands on than the previous games, but at the end of the day, the crown still rests with Big Red 1 so far. Try to get your hands on that one if you can. Until then, I'd say check out the movie The Nice Guys. Even if you've already seen it, it's worth revisiting. I've been Ghost from Call of Duty, and this has been a review of The Binding of Isaac. Give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. Okay, Call of Duty was a game about shooting. Before shooting, games were about jumping. When they made Call of Duty, people played the game, saying such things as, I liked Call of Duty, and they should make Call of Duty 2. Infinity Ward, who makes Call of Duty, took that idea and ran with it, releasing a game with that exact title 2 years after the original. During that time, however, there were basically 3 other Call of Duties. United Offensive, an expansion pack for the first game, which included an entirely new campaign. Finest Hour, a game made for home consoles because home consoles didn't like the original COD, and then Big Red 1, which released alongside Call of Duty 2 for last-gen consoles, since only the Xbox 360 could do Call of Duty 2. Of those spin-offs, the studio behind Finest Hour never really worked on a COD again, for obvious reasons. The studio behind United Offensive, Grey Matter Studios, was merged with the studio Treyarch to create a studio called Treyarch, and that combined team went on to make Big Red 1, under the name Treyarch. But all these were just spin-offs. So far, the main series was still Infinity Ward's baby. All 2 of the main games were made by them. Call of Duty 2 was an even bigger success than Call of Duty 1, so they went straight to work with Call of Duty 4. Only one issue. The publisher, Activision, realized that you have to make Call of Duty 3 before you make Call of Duty 4, and since Infinity Ward was far too deep in to pivot, they had to, for the first time ever, commission another studio to make a mainline Call of Duty, and that studio would of course be Treyarch, the makers of the most successful spin-off thus far. What Infinity Ward was cooking up with Call of Duty 4, well, I'm not gonna spoil it, but they were cooking up something big. If you ask me, you didn't really need a 6th World War II Call of Duty simply to fill a 1-year gap, but Activision saw things differently. Maybe we could release one of these every single year and charge full price. Would people still buy it? A foolhardy endeavor, no doubt. There's no way people are gonna pay for a brand new but hardly different full-priced game every single year, but they proceeded with their doomed plan nonetheless. Call of Duty 3 would release on November 7th, 2006 for the Xbox 360, the Xbox, and the PS2, and then a few weeks later as a launch title for the PS3 and the Wii. But Call of Duty 1 and 2 were too much for the 6th-gen consoles. But Call of Duty 3 isn't? I mean, the PS2 version doesn't even look that bad. Why was this not an option with the other two? And wait, this never released on PC? What the hell's going on? Well, the answer is basically that this game was super rushed and didn't matter. They had a lot of success with COD 1 and 2, and with the highly ambitious Call of Duty 4 right around the corner, this game really didn't even need to be well received. It just needed to be released on the new consoles in time for the holiday season. At the time, reviews were certainly on the positive side, but this game's reputation within the community is a bit less favorable. Back when this franchise was releasing banger after banger after banger, this one was considered to be the only major dud. I'd never played this game ever before, but I was always a huge fan of Black Ops 1 and 2, and after playing Big Red 1 for the first time recently, go watch my video about it, I was definitely looking forward to this one. I've said it before, but I always preferred Treyarch's games over Infinity Ward, so I was gonna be all like, yeah, everyone was wrong, and this is actually the best game in the trilogy. But no, everyone was right. This is probably the weakest game in the trilogy. If you can even call this a trilogy. See, despite all the spin-offs and stuff, Call of Duty 2 really did feel like the true sequel to Call of Duty 1. It had a similar aesthetic and clean look to Call of Duty 1, similar storytelling styles, characters from the first game returned, and the shooting felt very much like a direct evolution, where the other games seemed to be doing their own thing in all those regards. But Call of Duty 3 does not feel like the follow-up to 1 and 2. It really feels like a separate thing. Sometimes in a good way, but overall this campaign is is quite lackluster, and this is my own fault for shotgunning so many of these, but I'm getting extremely tired of the World War II setting. A lot of people in my comments wanted me to play United Offensive, which I never did a video about. I decided to play it before moving on from this early era of COD, and I'm not going to do a video about it. I thought it was fine. I liked it slightly more than Call of Duty 1, but it wasn't nearly as good as the Jesselnik Offensive. Thing is, I've had more than enough World War II, and nobody's watching these Call of Duty videos anyway, so I'm not going to waste my time doing a video on something I got nothing to say about. Me talking about it just then is like an expansion pack for this video. I have things to say about Call of Duty 3, but my foremost complaint is that just 3 years in, this franchise is already starting to feel stale. And I'm really just talking about the campaign. I can't imagine how samey the multiplayer was feeling at the time. Now, I'm sure the boys in the lab could feel this fatigue beginning to take hold too, and they clearly took steps to not just make this campaign feel like another one of the same thing. Instead of the traditional American, British, and Soviet campaign, they went for a more eclectic American, British, Canadian, and Polish campaigns. There still isn't much of a plot outside of allies fighting to win World War II, but their storylines are a bit more intertwined than before, and I remember a handful of the characters. For example, when the British officer and the French resistance fighter that had been butting heads the whole game finally shook hands and said, "You can be my wingman anytime," I was like, "Aw, good for them." And when somebody died, I was like, "Aw, somebody died." Character models are a massive step up from the last game. Look at them side by side. It's crazy that this was only 1 year later on the same hardware. Yes, part of it has to do with Treyarch using their own engine or some shit. The presentation here is quite impressive, definitely the best aspect of the game. Treyarch's games usually have a noticeably grittier aesthetic, and this game was one of the games that does. Works well for the ruined towns and rainy forests that most of this game is set in. It's more aesthetically homogeneous than the others, but I didn't have a problem with it for some reason. I just liked the vibe. I also appreciate that this game has full-on cutscenes, like with editing and camera work and everything. Seems obvious, but it helps me connect with the characters and usually makes the plot easier to understand. Most of the games before this one told the story through mission briefing PowerPoints, newsreels with voiceover, or people talking at you in first person. There were some minor exceptions, and there's definitely still plenty of that here, but this franchise is slowly getting better at delivering a narrative. And, like Big Red 1, your squad, whichever one you're playing as, tends to feel more like people. The acting and dialogue is more enthusiastic, and character animations are more vibrant. I also thought the music was pretty good. I mentioned how great it was in the first game and Finest Hour, and after that I really didn't mention the other scores because they weren't too notable. But I did like the music in this game, so I looked it up and found that it was composed by Joel Goldsmith, whose work I have no familiarity with. But he's apparently the son of legendary composer Jerry Goldsmith, whose work I am highly familiar with. Successful nepotism. Unfortunately, this game also features gameplay, which is where I found a lot of the faults. First off, bugs. There are a fair few of them. COD 1 and 2 were pretty much completely bug-free. Those games had enough time to be polished. This one was rushed, and things don't always work right.
Check it out! Friendlies!
Oh, friendlies? Where? Oh, they'll save us? X to boost. Okay. Oh, why am I moving like that? Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, my God. Oh, hey, let me back in. Hey, oh. God damn. Oh, Robert E. Lee. Second, shooting. Many would say the most important aspect of a COD. For some reason, it's significantly worse than the last game. Not sure why, but visibility while aiming is lower, there's a lot more flinching when shot, the recoil's kinda crazy, the maximum sensitivity is way too low. That's not fair. How come these games never let you reload the Garand? They did bring back grenade cooking from Big Red 1, makes grenades far more usable and fun, and they introduced the throwback grenades mechanic, which is not super refined yet, but does still kinda work. Third suck thing, the general unpleasantness. I get stuck on tiny objects, sometimes I get stuck on nothing. What am I stuck on right now? Ah, yes, a gas can, my greatest foe. The flinching makes it hard to aim, yes, but it also makes it just visually off-putting, especially when paired with the red screen flashing. We see the return of the awful can't move while being shot mechanic from Finest Hour. I hate how this message stays on screen when you get low on health. I know I'm supposed to take cover, just get these words out of my face so I can find some. The vehicle parts were actually pretty good. These are probably the best tank controls we've had so far, and the Jeep driving is surprisingly smooth, but the map navigation is straight asinine. Also, I guess they discovered QuickTime events between games because this one is chock full of them, and they're all lame and just draw things out unnecessarily. Stuff like planting a bomb, which used to just be one button press, is now an uninspired QTE. I did like the rowing minigame. They did a good job making it feel like rowing. This is probably the best rowing of any COD ever. But QuickTime events are pretty much always lame. Number 4th, no shotgun. Once again, I don't know why they don't want me to have fun. The multiplayer modes have a shotgun, but none of these campaigns have featured one. Hey, what the heck? Hey, that guy has a shotgun. Hey, give me your shotgun. Am I misremembering something? Did none of these campaigns have Hey, it's a shotgun. Hell yeah, boom, motherfucker, get some, bitch, boom. Okay, cross that off the list. This game has a shotgun. It is now my favorite. No, not really. It's not great, but it's not terrible. There are some good ideas and some really fun scenarios. A lot of missions allow you to take multiple approaches, and, you know, you're in a castle. I really did enjoy the visuals and pretty much everything that wasn't gameplay, but the bugs and the janky controls combined with the stale feeling that comes from playing 6 of these campaigns in a row really overshadowed all the good stuff. I just hope these Treyarch folks get another chance after this because Big Red 1 was so solid, and I think this studio has potential. I guess I also checked out the multiplayer. Unlike COD 2, I was able to find a match right away. I jumped into a game of Capture the Flag, did okay, got some decent kills, brought the flag back once, and then after that I got kicked out of the lobby because the next map was from the DLC, so I only played 1 round. I mean, it's decently fun. They introduced the class system. I like that the map was a little bigger and more layered than what I saw in COD 2, and there's a sprint function, but we use the crappy shooting from COD 3, and you know what? I don't think I'm going to be talking about the multiplayer for these games anymore. They all deserve a lot deeper of a dive that I am not inclined or frankly qualified to attempt. So I'm just gonna go on pretending that the campaigns is the main appeal of these games, and that's what people want to hear about. This game was alright to play, but if the rest of the franchise was just games featuring several loosely connected stories about different allied powers winning World War II, I'd probably stop this journey right here. But thankfully we're about to enter a new era, and up next is Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Good evening. I've been working my way through the Call of Duty campaigns one by one, in order. I'm not actually a big COD guy. I played a couple of the campaigns back in the Golden Age, and I would get super into zombies sometimes, but the multiplayer has never been my kind of bag. The first 6 games in this series that I just played were World War II shooters, which were huge at the time, and the Call of Duty games quickly became the top of the heap. They cranked out a crap ton of these in a pretty small window, releasing 6 games in only 3 years, and the quality ranged from terrible to okay to really good. But audiences at the time, and me after playing all these games in short succession, were quickly growing tired of this genre of shooter. The makers of Call of Duty, Infinity Ward, could smell this change in the market coming pretty early on, and decided to step away from the World War II setting right after completing Call of Duty 2. Modern military shooters were starting to gain a lot of traction, and that was obviously the right direction for this franchise to go. Right? Yes, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare would release on November 5th, 2007 on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC to overwhelming critical acclaim and record-breaking sales. The multiplayer was a bit of a revelation and really set the blueprint for what it would be to this very day. But I'm not a guy that talks about multiplayer. All I care about is the campaigns, and judging these games for the single-player experience they provide. And I never played this campaign when it came out. I've only played it once, and that was just a couple years ago, so this will be a nostalgia-free review as I decide objectively and definitively, beyond a shadow of a doubt, if this campaign is still the masterpiece that fans claim, or if it's kinda mid by current-day standards. As always, the game opens on a montage that shows you some of the stuff you'll be getting up to and establishing the tone, while also giving some hints at the game's story, because for the first time ever, this game has a full-on plot. The story of the older ones was just the Axis are trying to take over the whole world, so you have to shoot them all and win World War II. Which was a real event, so that story already existed. But for this one, Infinity Ward wisely figured that people wouldn't find it very fun to partake in the controversial real-life conflicts that we were seeing on the news at the time. So they had to write a completely original story, which was the correct move for a multitude of reasons. This game is set in the near-future year of 2011. There's a civil war going on in Russia, which is a big deal because Russia has a whole lot of nukes. Additionally, in the Middle East, a guy named Khaled al-Assad is currently reaching the end of a successful coup, soon to become one of the most dangerous leaders in the world. You step into the boots of the newly recruited British SAS officer Sergeant Soap McTavish. Like all 3 of the last main games, you begin on a base where you run through a tutorial. The core mechanics are pretty similar to those games, but there are some very significant additions that you get acquainted with here. Your superior officer Gaz gets you familiar with the new modern rifle as you shoot a few targets. You're now able to shoot through thin objects like wooden boards, which adds another layer of strategy and makes the gameplay more intense and realistic. Then you pick up a sidearm, then you switch to your rifle, then you pull out your sidearm. Remember that switching to your sidearm is always faster than reloading. That line is kind of a meme now, but it is a good tip if you never thought about it before. And knifing is even faster than that. The melee gun smack has been replaced with a knife that kills a man in 1 hit. Big improvement. You then meet up with your squad leader, Captain Price, who most people seem to agree is the grandson of Captain Price. The specifics of how he is or isn't related to his Call of Duty 1 and 2 counterpart doesn't really matter. He's basically the same guy. He sends you through an obstacle course where you learn 2 more new mechanics. Flashbangs, which you throw into a room and blind everyone in there and then mow them all down, a great tool. And sprinting, probably the biggest new addition to the core mechanics. I know some of the multiplayer modes in the older COD games had something like this, and the campaign in United Offensive let you sprint for about 0.03 seconds, but it was really clunky in all those games. They really focused on making the movement feel smooth in this. It's much easier to quickly dash between cover or to go from crouch to sprinting to shooting, and mashing the control stick to run faster feels like you really mean business. Then it's time to get into the field. We watch a mission briefing, which is like a super modern version of the dusty old slide projector mission briefings that Jason Statham used to give us in the old games.
Our mission is to locate as many of these anti-air guns as possible, wipe them out so that the bombers can make their runs. This building at the foot of the dam...
In this game, every character sounds like Jason Statham.
Using your knife is even faster than switching to your pistol.
Get yourself sorted out. Wheels up at 0200.
I once used defibrillators on myself. I put shards of glass in my fucking eye.
The squad is on their way to a cargo ship said to be carrying an important package. You take out the first couple of guys quiet as you work your way through a bit of the ship. It's cool to see some gameplay scenarios that aren't just straight firefights. This is really the franchise's first stealth mission. Some of them would have a mission where you take out one guy with stealth and then the shooting kicks off, but this is the first one where you're expected to maintain a stealthy approach for a bit. And it goes without saying, but the atmosphere in this mission is also very strong. Eventually, stealth is blown and you have to fight a bunch of these guys head on. You learn how helpful flashbangs can be, and you get to try out a couple of the guns that the enemies drop. Feels so refreshing after cycling through the same handful of World War II guns for so many games. The core gunplay feels ridiculously good. The original game had decent shooting that they mostly improved upon a lot with Call of Duty 2, but this is the first one where I'm actually enjoying the mechanics and not just working around them. They locate the package, which turns out to be nuclear bomb-making material, but hostile reinforcements are on their way and they have to get out of there fast, so they grab the manifest and haul ass. The ship is attacked and starts sinking, so you gotta run out of there even more. Another fun gameplay moment that isn't combat. It's just a scripted running sequence with some very, very light platforming, but I like that they're adding some variety to the gameplay. You escape the boat just in time, barely making your jump to the helicopter with a hand from Captain Price. Infinity Ward presents Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Boom, the title card drops as this dope theme song comes in. The music was composed by Stephen Barton. Not the biggest musician to work on one of these games, but you'd recognize his work, and the score in this game is pitch perfect, leaving behind the heroic and triumphant anthems of World War II for a tense, dramatic work that's more in line with the modern setting and incorporating military noises like jet sounds and radio static. We then cut to the Middle East, where we take the perspective of the president of Middle East country, Yasser al-Fulani. You're being dragged by 2 armed men who throw you into the back of a car. With a little love tap, you're sent on your way. These other guys drive you through the devastated streets of Middle East country while you listen to a radio broadcast from the nation's newly crowned leader, Khaled al-Assad, talking some real shit about your time as president. The opening credits roll as you watch the new regime take the streets. So eerie and macabre, being just a passenger bearing witness to the violence, murder, and human misery on display. Plus, this guy looks like he's drowning in cologne. If it's your first time playing, you might not be 100% clear where you're headed, but either way, this is disturbing and always makes me feel a little sick. In a good way. When you reach your destination, you're dragged out of the car and tied to a post where you're met by al-Assad. A mysterious bald man hands him a gun, which he shows to the camera, then walks over to President al-Fulani and executes him in the face. Middle East country has fallen to al-Assad. The Americans have a plan for that, but in the meantime, we're back as soap. The squad is sent to rescue a Russian informant named Nikolai. Another mission that begins with stealth. You get some stealthy guns, the red dot sight really improves aiming, and the sniper scopes are far better than what we had access to in the World War II era. And they're really satisfying to shoot people with, which is aided by the extra helping of blood, making this the first M-rated game in the franchise. Also something about historical violence usually getting a lower rating than modern-day violence or some shit. When we infiltrate this nearby town, we do some night vision stuff, having cool equipment like night vision and specialized guns, and being able to knife enemies where all they can do is hit you with their gun. That's what makes you feel like you're a real special ops, non-regular soldier, a real badass mofo, not just some guy like in the previous games. Squad, I am Delta Tango Night Vision. What is your position? Is this connected to the zombies lore? The team rescues Nikolai with the help of some local Russian loyalists, who I guess are the good guys of the Russian Civil War. After the mission, we switch perspectives to Sergeant Paul Jackson of the United States Marine Corps. You're briefed on a mission to drop into Middle East country and capture Al-Assad. You fly in on these helicopters. Pretty cool right here. This is nice. This was the point where I really began to take in how great the visuals are. Obviously, they don't look like the best graphics of 2025, but they do hold up tremendously well. Infinity Ward's new engine and the very specific art direction feel kinda timeless. Jackson and the Marines work their way through the streets and into a TV station where they believe Al-Assad is giving a speech. This is probably my favorite location in the game. We've never seen anything like it in the franchise before, and the physics of the computers and TVs and paper and debris flying everywhere during the shootout adds to the chaos in such a great way. But when they get to the newsroom, it turns out it was just a recording, and Al-Assad is long gone. They regroup and chase him to the capital city of Middle East country, fighting their way through more streets. Yeah, you know, if you think about it, man, friendly fire isn't. The Marines have to get a tank moving, so we cut back to the English, who are flying their informant to safety in a helicopter when they are suddenly hit with a big fat missile, crashing their helicopter still within Russian borders, ending up in a bit of trouble in hostile territory. At this point, I had collected enough Intel laptops to unlock the first cheat, COD Noir, which turns the game black and white style. It actually looks kinda cool. I like COD Noir. They should make a Call of Duty game set in the 1940s. Eventually, reinforcements arrive in the form of a AC-130 super megaplane, an absolute beast of a military aircraft which you then take control of the weapons of. This is one of the most iconic moments in the game. Through thermal vision, you escort your men across these villages using the AC-130's full arsenal of weaponry. The plane has unlimited ammo and you're pretty much invincible, so you get a big dick feeling. They also throw in a handful of limitations to keep things interesting, and there's some cool insight into the way a team like this would communicate about positioning. The game developers worked with a lot of military consultants to make this stuff feel as authentic as possible. I guess everyone does that, though. The boys are extracted and we move back to the Marines' perspective in the Middle East, escorting a tank and attempting to take the capital. I'm relieved that this game never makes you drive a tank. Every single one of the last 6 did, and they were usually super frustrating missions. Some games did it better than others, but they were mostly half-baked and unnecessary. These are the parts of Call of Duty 4 that feel the most like participating in modern warfare. American troops fighting through war-torn Middle Eastern cities. Even if the specific context here is entirely fictional, this is what war looked like in 2007. I like firing giant machine guns in this. They were really clunky and kinda useless in the older games, but the modern LMGs handle the same as the other guns, and they have great range, decent accuracy, you can move around easier with them. They're awesome for taking down large bunched-together groups or just standard combat. Grenade cooking and grenade throwing, which both originated in Treyarch games, finally make their way over, and they both feel far more refined. Soon the Marines get confirmation on Al-Assad's location, so they hop back in the choppers and head straight for him. They believe he may already be in possession of a nuclear warhead, so the Marines are going in fast and heavy. You shoot a big cannon from the side of a helicopter in this part. It's pretty fun. A friendly chopper goes down and you have to land to rescue the pilot, then evacuate. They do just fine. You get back to the helicopter and get in the air safely. Just when things seem better than ever, the nuclear warhead is detonated, giving us another iconic moment. As soon as you see the flash, your comms cut out. For a second it seems like you're going to be able to fly away in time, but then the blast hits, the helicopter starts spinning out of control, your man flies out of the back, and you crash land. Sergeant Jackson regains consciousness just long enough to painfully crawl out of the helicopter and take in how hopeless his situation is before meeting his end. Another very chilling moment that makes me feel a little sick. So well done. I have an issue though. Sometimes video games don't work the way they're supposed to. Sometimes something is supposed to happen in a game to progress the game forward, but it doesn't happen because of an error or a bug in the game. So when I first played Modern Warfare and nothing was happening in this part, I ended up restarting like 3 times, assuming that something was wrong before I realized that I was just dying. But that's probably just another case of fake gamer syndrome. It shouldn't take away from how great this moment is. R.I.P. Jackson. The other boys find out about the nuclear explosion, and Nikolai informs Price that Al-Assad would never sacrifice himself like that, so he has to be alive. He gives them the location of the safe house where he'd probably be. They drop in nearby and clear the town of a whole bunch of guys. I really like the change they made to the compass, being more 2D on the bottom of the screen. The old one was a bit confusing. This is a lot more clear. They find Al-Assad in this barn. Captain Price starts beating the shit out of him, asking him where he got the bomb and why he did the bomb. He doesn't give Price anything, but his phone rings. Price answers it, talks to someone, then shoots Al-Assad in the face, hanging up the phone and telling us the person on the other end was Imran Zakayev, who we find out was the bald guy who handed the gun to Al-Assad in the beginning, and Captain Price has a history with him. We then flash back to 15 years earlier when Price was a young lieutenant on a mission to infiltrate Chernobyl to take out Zakayev to stop him from continuing to traffic nuclear material for nuclear bombs. The team includes only Price and his commanding officer Captain McMillan for a super quiet stealth mission, quite possibly the most iconic mission in the game. You quietly move through this village, picking off guards as McMillan orders you to. It's not an instant fail if you make a little noise, but it's beneficial to keep things on the DL. About halfway through, when you're crossing a field, you notice an enemy tank squad crossing towards you, so you have to lay down in the grass in your ghillie suit and slowly weave between them so they don't notice you. A very tense moment for a gamer. You get deeper into the destroyed city, another one of the best set pieces in this game, and you slowly work your way up to a vantage point where you can get a clean shot on Zakayev. The position is pretty far away, and it's a little windy out, so it's a difficult shot, but your window is small and there's no time to wait. After attempting to compensate for wind speed, you take your shot. It looks like a kill from where you are, so McMillan and Price begin their escape. A helicopter crashes on McMillan, causing him to become injured. You then have to balance carrying him with putting him down and shooting, as you can't do both at the same time. You get McMillan to the chopper and escape safely, but the mission is a failure. Zakayev, of course, lived, losing just his arm and is now back for revenge. Al-Assad was just a puppet this whole time. Back in present day, Soap, Gaz, Captain Price, and the rest of them have to make it back to the extraction point, which goes okay. They then team up with the US Marines to go after Zakayev. Price knows the best way to get to him is to go after his son, Niko Bellic. In an attempt to capture him, they kill a bunch of his guys at an outpost and dress up in their uniforms to set up an ambush. Pretty sure that's considered a war crime. Anyway, it's vital to capture Niko alive because he's their only lead whatsoever. He escapes the ambush and you chase him all through this town. This is where I got enough Intel laptops to unlock the ragtime warfare effect, which is the funnest thing in the game. We corner Niko on a roof and try to arrest him, but he's unfortunately able to pop his brain before we get a chance to do anything. A catastrophic setback considering he was their only lead and they really drilled in how fucked the situation would be if he died. Never mind, I guess Captain Price says don't worry about it. Zakayev is sure to show his face now that his son is dead. A still image of Zakayev gives a big villain speech about how he's gonna destroy the whole world. I feel like this would have had a lot more impact as a cutscene. Why are Infinity Wards so adverse to cutscenes? Well, now it's down to the wire. If our boys don't take the nuclear launch facility from Zakayev, he's gonna let those babies fly. We drop into the snowy mountains nearby and shoot people on our way to the facility. Very nice winter atmosphere in these mountains as the sun comes up. You arrive at the facility just a little too late and the missiles begin to launch. Their only hope now is to infiltrate the facility and stop the bombs remotely. No fighting in the war room. Nice, nice. That's a sick reference to the movie Doctor Strange. It's a pretty tough fight to get to the control room, but they push through with enough time left to save the world. A real bro move. But things won't be wrapped up until Zakayev is in the ground. Our team escapes the facility with Zaki's guys in pursuit who managed to destroy a bridge that we desperately needed to cross. The car crashes, we hold them off as long as we can, but Zakayev pulls up, kills most of your squad, including Gaz. Just when all hope is lost, Zakayev gets distracted by an explosion. Price slides a gun over to Soap and you bust these boys up, putting Zakayev down for good. Friendly soon arrive to help and it really looks a lot like Captain Price dies in this part right here, but he does return in the next game, so I don't know. He also died in Call of Duty 1 and then came back in Call of Duty 2, so I don't know anything. We lost some men along the way, but the world continues to spin thanks to us. Fade to credits. Then we actually get a post-credits mission, which at first I thought was a gay sex scene.
We're going deep, and we're going hard.
But it turns out to be a standalone mission where you infiltrate a plane and rescue a hostage and jump out. It's not really related to the story, so it's just for fun. And it's hecka fun. I went back and played it on Veteran a bunch of times until I beat it. The trick is to use flashbangs and run past people as fast as you can. Yes, I think this campaign is incredible. When I first played it a few years ago, I found it kinda underwhelming, but I'm more refined now, and after playing all the ones that led up to it, I get the mind-blowingness of this campaign. Having to create an original story when the last two games they made had next to no story seems like it would have gone terribly, but the story of this game is shockingly well done. There are actual villains for you to understand and get invested in. I mean, earlier COD games did have villains, but they were rarely shown or mentioned, and you don't personally shoot them in the head like you do at the end of this game. These are actual story antagonists. The protagonists were a lot more memorable too. Captain Price, Gaz, Nikolai really felt like my bros by the end. Price's backstory was good, and he's just a hard motherfucker. I even felt a connection to the player characters, even though just like the other ones, you don't ever see them or hear them speak. Soap, of course, becomes a much bigger character after this, but even if that never happened, it was fun to play as this kinda rookie on your first assignment in this badass squad, plus a name like Soap is gonna stay with you. You don't get quite as much from the American character Paul Jackson, but when he dies slowly in a nuclear inferno, I was like, no, this is not a death befitting a hero. Justice for my boy. Oh yeah, they also did a pretty decent remaster of this game some time ago. I didn't play it for this video because I didn't want to spend $40 on a slight upgrade to something I already have, but it looks nice. And they did some cool stuff, like adding Makarov to this part. People seem generally happy with this remaster. The campaign, at least. But I also think the original version holds up extremely well. There's no question that it's the best one so far. The shooting is the tightest, the combat is the most intense, the animations and details are on another level. We see many modern things, such as cell phone, glow sticks, rap music, fluorescent lights, plastic tarps, all combined with the most compelling story they've told at this point. It's definitely not mid whatsoever, even if I might have thought that a little bit at one point. But is it a masterpiece? Well, I don't think it's a masterpiece of gaming like Zelden Ring or GTA 7, but it's absolutely a masterpiece of a Call of Duty campaign. Will the story and gameplay eventually be topped? Well, next on deck is the game Call of Duty World at War, a campaign I've actually never played before, but I've heard only good things about it, so I'm quite looking forward to that. If you're looking forward to that, then hit that subscrizzy and bink that beb. Alright, thanks for watching that compilation video. Like I said at the beginning, I have more epic Call of Duty content available over on my second channel where I make lower effort videos. And keep your eye on this channel this week for my brand new video that I made about the Resident Evil movies. It's gonna be incredible. Good night.